Next, a true-life spy story about the al-Qaeda triple agent who dealt a deadly blow to the CIA. Margaret Warner has our book conversation.
It was the most devastating attack on the CIA in more than 2 decades. On December 30th, 2009, a suicide bomber blew himself up inside a CIA base in Afghanistan. Dead were 7 CIA officers, a Jordanian intelligence agent, and their driver.
At least 8 American civilians were killed in a suicide bombing today in Afghanistan. The bomb exploded at a military base in Coast
Early reports were sketchy.
Pakistani border. The base supports reconstruction and other civilian programs.
The man carrying out the audacious assault was a Jordanian doctor, Humam Hali al-Balawi, who was initially recruited by Jordanian intelligence. The CIA thought he would lead them to Osama bin Laden and his top deputy, Ayman al-Zawahiri. Instead, he turned out to be a triple agent for al-Qaeda. Like many suicide bombers, he made a testimonial video just before his fatal mission.
It's not watch, it's detonator. To kill as much as I can, inshallah. This is my dua. To kill you, to kill your partner, Jordanian partner.
How the CIA came to trust Balawi and how al-Qaeda sent him on his murderous path are revealed in a new book, The Triple Agent, the al-Qaeda mole who infiltrated the CIA. The writer is Washington Post reporter Joby Warrick, and he joins us now. So, Joby, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, remind us, first of all, how big a disaster was this in the history of the CIA?
It's arguably the biggest intelligence disaster since the Cold War for the CIA. There hasn't been this many lives lost in a single incident since the 1980s. And in terms of just treachery and deceit, it's as big as it gets. You know, the CIA led into a trap in which multiple officers, including 7 Americans, were killed.
So now tell us about the perpetrator, the triple agent, Humam al-Balawi. Who was he? What drove him, and how did he get in a position to be able to pull off something like this?
You probably could not script a character as improbable as this man. First of all, he starts out as just being a lowly Jordanian, a pediatrician of all people, working in a refugee clinic in Jordan, living a quiet life, 2 children in the suburbs and that sort of thing. And just through this series of improbable circumstances, ends up being arrested and interrogated and then made into an informant, with his own interest in doing so, because at heart he was also an al-Qaeda sympathizer, and he was looking for a way to somehow strike out and do his own form of jihad, and this is exactly what happened in the end.
And he was secretly at night actually penning anti-U.S. missives or screeds on the internet, right, under a pseudonym.
He had a dangerous hobby, which is he was a blogger under an assumed name, as you said. He was writing fairly radical things, supporting al-Qaeda leaders, trying to explain them to the masses, and doing it in a very effective way. So he had a very large following, young people in particular.
And what do you know about Balawi and what drove him? I mean, you had a lot of detail in here. How did you get inside his head?
He left quite a record of his own thinking. He wrote, hundreds and hundreds of words in his blogs before he was arrested. And even after he went to Pakistan, he continued to write articles. He submitted to interviews. He did multiple videotapes right up to the day that he was killed. So he was able to tell us what he was thinking, and he even gave us a glimpse of his own internal conflict as he was trying to decide whether it was worth it to sacrifice himself. This is not some young, naive 20-year-old giving himself up for a few $100. This is a doctor, a learned man, and he really wrestled with this idea of, will I kill myself? This is the best I can do for God, for Allah. In the end, he ultimately decided that this is the path he had to take.
So now what on earth caused the CIA to put someone like this into position to pull off a catastrophe?
Well, unlikely is the way to describe this man, and that includes from the CIA's point of view too, because as far as they were concerned, he was one of many possible informants, someone who could be sent someplace and may or may not be able to get access. So they took a gamble on him, sent him to Pakistan, paid his airfare and a little setup money, but essentially didn't really expect that much out of him, sort of dropping him off into a place where he may get his head cut off as far as anyone knew, and the new great loss. But as it turns out, he ended up very quickly becoming extremely good, and he started finding more and more amazing things and giving it to the CIA through the Jordanians, his handlers, and was showing the CIA that he was getting very, very close to the inner circle of al-Qaeda.
Including with videos.
Exactly. He had not just boast or saying that he was doing this, but he was sending back solid evidence that he was getting very close to senior leaders.
So the CIA decides they have to meet him. One of the astonishing sort of warning signs or bungles here is no American had ever met him.
Right. And this is what becomes alarming to the CIA as they began to see this incredible evidence that he was giving to them, and realizing that no one had ever laid eyes on him. And so it became a priority for the CIA to have this man brought to a place where they could meet him in person, where they could look him in the eye to see if he was telling the truth, and also to potentially arm him for the things he was about to do. And that assignment included, very likely, bringing them to the #2 leader of al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri.
Whom he claimed to be his doctor.
Claimed to be his doctor, and he claimed to be the doctor to the #2 leader of al-Qaeda.
Now, as I said, there were this book is painful to read. There are so many missed signals, so many warning signs ignored, including one, that nobody had ever met him, but two, that the actual CIA guy in Amman smelled a rat.
It's true. And the Jordanians are quite good at human intelligence, and we've relied on them for years to help us find terrorists and help us sort of sniff out their networks. And in this particular case, there were concerns that this man, Balawi, might be not what he claimed. There was even a direct warning that he might be leading them into an ambush. But there are reasons that the CIA was able to look at these warnings and say, this is just infighting among Jordanians, and they were able to disregard it and not take it seriously.
But then right before he comes to this CIA outpost, didn't the CIA agent who was closest to the operation send a warning back to the station chief saying something's really bad here?
And that's part of the reconstruction of what went wrong. There were not only warnings from the Jordanians, but some of the Americans had concerns and suspicions too. And so there was a back and forth between the Americans at the coast, the base where they were all staying, and also back and forth to Washington. How do we handle this man? What's the proper security parameters? Do we trust him or not? It was quite a robust argument. In the end, the imperative was to meet the person, and so the cautions were disregarded.
Now, they could have stopped him even up to the last minute, yet he gets in with going through no screening. How did that happen?
Yeah, this is really remarkable.
To meet all these not high level, but senior CIA people.
Yes, and there are traditions within the CIA for dealing with informants, and you never trust them because you're not sure where they've been and who they've been threatened by. And so just as a matter of routine, they're often searched as soon as they get into the car. Someone checks them from just to make sure they're not wearing wires, for example, let alone bombs. In this case, because he was so valuable and because they wanted to see him so urgently and they were so worried about Taliban spies, they allowed him to get through 3 layers of security without being checked or searched a single time until the moment that he was within a few feet of a great number of CIA operatives.
You also point out this was not a freelance mission. It was approved at the highest levels in Washington.
That's right. This was something that, because if you think back to the excitement that surrounded the death of bin Laden just a few months ago, an opportunity to go to the very heart of al-Qaeda, this seemed to be the same opportunity, and there was excitement not just in Langley at CIA headquarters, but all the way up to Washington, where the president himself was briefed about this meeting that was about to take place.
And of course, the CIA did an internal review. What lessons did they take away from that? What have they concluded from this about how they bungled this so badly?
There's lots of anguish and grief because of the loss of these people. But they did look back and find not just little things that went wrong, but systemic problems, such as a failure to be attentive to counterintelligence, which is the handling of informants, to make sure you have experienced people in the right places. There's been a lot of soul-searching and a lot of change because of this accident.
And did anyone pay a price?
You know, that's been a criticism of the CIA, but it's typical of the way they work. They try to keep their problems internal. This is an agency that doesn't like to be in the spotlight any more than it has to be. In this case, it was deemed that mistakes were made by people who, in this case, weren't alive anymore. And so, you know, some commissions were set up and studies were made. No one was disciplined, as far as we can tell, but things hopefully have changed regardless of that.
Well, Joby Warrick, thank you. Great book. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.